Yeah. And clean and salty. That needs a lot of information.
And I'd like to welcome you to the June meeting of the LCTCS Board of Supervisors. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that the board meeting is being live streamed. With that, I will turn to Chair Mount to call the meeting to order.
Thank you. We'll call the meeting to order for June 14th of the Board of Supervisors. First is our Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Paul Price will lead us.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Next is our board members. All right. I'd like to invite Mr. Jason Hessex to administer the oath of office to our new student board members, David Payne and Jamie Zerang. Jamie, if you'll come forward.
Good morning. Only curveball I'm going to throw you is in the first line when I say, state your name. You say your name. Okay. I state your name, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the Constitution and laws of this state, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge
and perform all the duties
and perform all duties
incumbent on me as a member of the Louisiana Community and Technical College System Board of Supervisors.
and incumbent on me, the Louisiana,
As a member of the Louisiana Community
as a member of the Louisiana Community
and Technical College System
and Technical College Systems
Board of Supervisors,
Board of Supervisors,
according to the best of my ability
according to the best of my ability
and understanding.
and understanding.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
After dropping out of high school in 1996, David Payne worked many minimum wage jobs without room to grow or advance. After 25 years of this, in the fall of 2020, he decided to go back to school to earn his high school diploma. On June 16, 2016, Payne finally earned his high school diploma. 4 years later, he enrolled at Louisiana Delta Community College as a general studies major with a concentration in history. He is currently serving his second term as SGA president. Payne also enjoys serving as a Louisiana Delta Community College JAG, or Jobs for America's Graduates, advisory committee member. Payne continues to work in public service as a deacon of the Olive Branch Church of West Monroe, Louisiana. There he serves as the youth director and planning and worship committee member, as vice president of the Young Adult Auxiliary for the Old Line Baptist Association. Payne says stays very busy serving his community and many others. Wow, I'm impressed. Jamie Zerang is a sophomore at Fletcher Technical Community College. She's working on a certification through the International Sports Science Association for a physical therapy specialist, as working on her certification for IT Fundamentals Plus. She has 6 credit hours left to graduate with an Associate of General Studies, and 3 credits are in progress. Jamie's been on the chancellor's list twice, first in the fall of 22 and again in the spring of 23. She's the next SGA president at Fletcher Technical Community College and is a proud member of Phi Sigma Pi National Honor Fraternity. She has accomplished all of this through 2 major surgeries. Wow. So we'll call on David first. David, would you like to make a comment? And you'll have to speak into the mic.
I just want to say I'm very, very proud to be here. And I look forward to working with this board and doing all I can for the students of LCTCS.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Jamie, would you like to say a few words again, just speaking to the mic?
Yes, ma'am. I'm very proud and thankful to be here, and I look forward to working with you guys over the next year. Thank you for having me.
Hey, great. We look forward to working with both of you and welcome to the board. Okay, if Ms. Waldrop will call the roll.
Chair Mount,
Present.
present. Supervisor Jackson,
Present.
present. Supervisor Roman Hardy is absent. Supervisor Burke
Present.
is present. Supervisor Bradford. Present. Is present. Supervisor Butler McIntyre.
Here.
Is present. Supervisor Hardy Tim.
Here.
Is present. Supervisor Johnson
Here.
is here. Supervisor Lee. Present. Is here. Supervisor McConduit is absent. Supervisor Murphy
Here.
is present. Supervisor Price
Here.
is present. Supervisor Salath
Here.
is present. Supervisor Smith
Here.
is present. Supervisor Toops
Here.
is present. Supervisor Payne is present. Supervisor Zarang is present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the June 14th, 2023 meeting agenda.
Madam Chair, I move.
All right.
Motion by Supervisor Butler McIntyre and Toops.
Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, that motion passes. Next, we'll request a motion to approval of the meeting minutes from May 10th, 2023.
Motion by Toops, a second by Bradford.
All right. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, that motion passes. Are there any public comments?
There are none at this
All
time.
right. Thank you. All right. Next, we have the consent agenda items for
Very good.
consideration of the board.
Staff recommends that the board approve the consent agenda, which consists of agenda items G1 through G4.
All right. Is there a motion?
Motion by Price, second by Smith.
Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, that motion passes. All right. I want to thank each of our board members, particularly for attending the college commencements. Hopefully you had the opportunity to do that this year. It's an exciting time, for not only our colleges, but more importantly for our students. To have board members there means so much to them, seeing you there. And I know it's been a great experience for me over the years. So with that, I'll call on Dr. Sullivan.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Mount. Quick update from the president's report. I want to begin by inviting Chancellor Rick Bateman and probably one of our best business partners, and Jay Johnson from GDIT, that is General Dynamic IT, for those of you that may not see those letters often, but want to talk with you about a really important economic development effort that is ongoing here in Louisiana. One of the most difficult things to do in our business is to go to a small town and talk to the small town elected officials about the education and training that you want to provide to their citizens. Because oftentimes the way they read that is, you want to educate the people of my town so they can leave. What the folks at GDIT have done is completely turn the telescope around. And we wanted to bring them here today to give you a better understanding of exactly what many of our partners are doing. So Jay, thank you for being an incredible partner. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing. But with that, I will turn it over to you, Chancellor Bateman.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Good morning,
Push the
Chairman.
button.
Push the button there.
On the face.
There we are.
There you go. Good morning, Chair Mount, President Sullivan, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to come to the table to talk about this partnership. It is a pleasure to be at the table with a great partner and a friend in Jay Johnson. Jay is the Vice President of Technology Shared Services for GDIT. This is a company that we've had a deep and growing partnership with for the last 10 years. And we're excited to tell you about an innovation that we're bringing to the Natchitoches campus. It was probably a year ago that I was having a conversation with Jay about how we were transitioning the Natchitoches and Sabine Valley campuses to BIPSI. That's when he shared with me an innovative model that he had begun to use in Kentucky to build hub sites in rural communities to grow a remote workforce. We spent some time with that model. I think we figured out some ways to improve upon it, and we really began to think about what it might mean for a rural community like Natchitoches to diversify employment opportunities and to build a pipeline for jobs in the knowledge economy. And that's what we're working on. With that, I'll pause and turn it over to my friend Jay. We have daughters that room together at LSU. That's another story we'll have to talk about
So
later.
you guys are almost related.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having the opportunity to come here today and speak to you about some of the programs that we've got. Very excited about the partnership with BIPSI and looking at how we can expand it throughout the state. General Dynamics Information Technology is part of a cooperative endeavor agreement with the state, and we established operations in about 2014 in the Bossier market. We started with, I think, 40 employees, and I think we're upwards of 1,400 at this point in time in Bossier. Looking to replicate, obviously on a slightly smaller scale, similar success in our latest campus in Natchitoches. So the model that we spun up in Kentucky was not nearly as evolved as what we have working with BIPSI. The model in Kentucky was basically community colleges had an abundance of facility, and they needed labor to put people to work so that they could afford tuition to go to their schools. It was a very simplistic model, a good model nonetheless. But what we've done with BIPSI is built upon an existing relationship that we already had in the Bossier market with some certified tradecraft in creating a help desk technician and some other technical certification programs that we've been working on for years, and being able to transplant that. So not only are we able to employ people in the Natchitoches market, but we're able to employ them in a real symbiotic fashion. There are folks in Natchitoches that can't afford to go to school. I can help meet that need by giving them payroll. There are folks that are going to school that need employment to sustain themselves while they're going to school, and I can help meet that need. And then similarly, there are people that are in my employment that are looking to elevate their skills. And that's really where we lean heavily on the partnership with BIPSI and the programs that we've established. We start many of our folks as contact center agents at the most entry-level jobs, where their last job may have been McDonald's or Walmart. And then we move them into a call center job, teaching them how to talk professionally to individuals. And then we begin to upskill them through programs with BIPSI to get them technical certifications and a help desk certificate that allows them to succeed in a service desk role, which then is truly a jumping off point for their IT career. Because from that service desk role, they can now jump into a cyber career, they can jump into a networking career, or they can jump into an application development career. Each of those are sustaining careers that we at GDIT have in Bossier and in Louisiana that frankly, we struggle to find workforce to fill. So I've created a workforce management engine, if you will, that allows us to power that. So far, we've had 25 plus people graduate from this program, and the average graduate has seen their salary increase by over 70%. They've all also received 1.3 promotions on average since we began the program.
Wow. You know, one of the points that I think maybe for those of you that have not had an opportunity to visit the Bossier Parish campus or to visit GDIT, they're one and the same location wise. One of the things that's most impressive to me is to see the number of people that are moving across campus from GDIT to Bossier Parish Community College to either take or teach classes. Likewise, students from Bossier Parish Community College working at GDIT. What an incredible laboratory for workforce development. You created that, Jay. We are thankful to you and to the organization. You know, Chancellor Bateman, your team is producing, or else we wouldn't see the expansion. So thank you for the great work going on. I'll just ask any questions from board members.
Great news.
Good news.
Keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And so just to that point, surely there's another location out there that might make sense?
Yeah, so the objective is to get about 12 to 18 months under our belt in Natchitoches, demonstrate meaningful results, and then use those as proof points. But I will say that we have ongoing conversations with Fletcher. We also have a campus down in UNO, and we're working with Susan Guerrero down in the Fletcher area. And then also we have a desire to go into the northeast section of the state up in the Lake Providence area as well.
What about the southwest part?
Absolutely.
Me, right?
Absolutely.
Well, Jay, thank you. You've been an incredible partner. We're thankful to be able to be at the table with you, to be able to answer the call when you guys do pick up the phone. So thank you for the great work. Thank you, Chancellor Bateman. And with that, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, turning our attention to what I think all of us have been focused on now, it felt like at least for the last few months, and that is the legislative session. I'd like to ask Dr. Chandler LaBeouf, if he would please come forward, and I'd like to ask he and Joe Marine, I'm sorry, to come forward and do a quick update on both the legislative session as well as the budgetary implications. So with that, I think Chandler, you have a few pieces you would like to mention to the board. Maybe we can start there and then we'll talk about the session.
Yep, perfect. Absolutely. Good morning, Chair Mount, Dr. Sullivan, and members of the board. We did showcase and put together a few items. One is an advocacy brochure. That is the points that we advocated this session and will continue to advocate throughout the next year. We did also put together a workforce case for support as we continue to talk about the importance of non-credit training and industry-based certification across our state and the nation. So you have those two pieces, and the healthcare report as well, from the investment that the legislator made from the 25 million, where we stand today and where we want to go. But more importantly, I just have a high-level overview of a legislative session. We can't go forward without thanking both the House and Senate members for the historic investment in higher education that was made this year. Over 600 bills were filed. LCTCS was tracking over 90 bills this session. And those investments made were around students, faculty, increasing campus safety, improving our workforce readiness, capital outlay projects, and deferred maintenance projects, just to name a few. But I want to make it important note that it was critical for us to remain focused on the advocacy around affordability for our students with things like the MJ Foster Promise Program, Go Grants, TOPS funding, workforce training, and enhancing our campus infrastructure. Again, Joe will talk a little bit about some of those investments, but higher education saw the largest investment in capital outlay as well as in deferred maintenance, especially since 2008. Some of those investments in capital outlay are around 200 million and probably nearly about 900 million total when you look at the money bills, HB1, HB2, 550, 560. And just to highlight a few things that we were focused, non-money bills, of course, the MJ Foster Promise Program, advocating for the dollars and the affordability for resources and textbooks, be the dollars that students can access their first semester. Was really the change that we went after this time from last time with the program. It was last dollar applied for those resources. This time it's first dollar, first semester for those students. Nursing education, really working with the Board of Nursing to make sure that students who reach certain credentials and milestones were able to reach their degrees, awards, and also their certifications to be able to enter the workforce when needed during those milestones. The Associate Educator Program, of course, the veteran friendly and military designations and scholarships and support services for the population. And the one more important thing to note is the Louisiana First, the Louisiana Foundation Integrated Research System. The opportunity to begin sharing data across certain stakeholders in our state is going to be key as we continue to advocate moving forward. So that's a high level overview. And Joe, I don't know if you have any other additions.
Certainly, I'll give another high overview. So good morning, members of the board. This has been a pretty successful, obviously a pretty successful legislative session, not only for higher ed, but for most state agencies and state government, given all the monies that were brought into the state budget. For the system itself, we realize about a 14% increase in our state funding for next year over the current fiscal year, and roughly about $18.5 million. What makes up those dollars? I'll just kind of give a brief overview. It's $5 million is related to the funding formula recommendations by the Board of Regents. 2 million of it, 2.1 million, is related to mandated cost increases. It's legislative auditors, civil service fees, and other things that state agencies have to normally eat, right? So they normally have to eat that out of their budget. In this case, this is one of the few years where we actually got funding for it to keep us and keep most people whole In addition to that, we had $7.1 million in line items provided, mainly attributed to Delgado, which got $1.8 million for upgrades to their campuses and field house. The board office has $5 million that was given to it that we have to work through going forward to make targeted investments. There are needs that we have to meet. And lastly, there's a roughly $4.3 million in faculty pay increases, of which, to break it down further, 3.5 is targeted specifically to faculty. The remaining $1 million roughly is for police. It's one of the few cases where, in times where people will realize that our frontline officers are vastly underpaid. There's a high turnover rate related to them, and that something needed to be done to bolster their pay. So monies were targeted across all our higher ed to boost up the pay of those officers that are serving at our colleges, and also for those, again, on the front lines, helping to provide security at our campuses. So again, an increase of $18.5 million. If you look at it in terms of the total budget, you might actually see a decrease, and that's due to some technical adjustments that were done. So don't let that rattle you necessarily. If you look at the total budget, there's actually a decrease next year over this year, but it's because the state is non-recurring some funds that we spent for healthcare and other things. The story in all of this is that the net increase has occurred in the state budget side of $18.5 million. With that, I'll open to any questions you may have.
Any questions for Chandler or Joe?
The discuss, I'm sorry,
No, go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, so didn't we have a discussion, Dr. Sullivan, about changes in the formula and more generous allocation? And I'm drawing a blank on this for some non-credit stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know we had a
No,
discussion perhaps last night.
you're right on, and that is the next item that we'll touch on as a part of the board development segment. It is not funded at this point at the Board of Regents, but certainly this is the year where we believe that we should be able to create that non-credit funding formula.
Yeah, because we've had, again, traditionally, we've had battles and not, we would get state appropriations, but then when it got to the Board of Regents and how the formula was applied, did not provide the correct credit for some of the things we do. If I'm saying that the right way, right? Okay.
Absolutely correct. But the one thing I think is important to note here is in the last, I would say 5 to 6 years, we have not had a better partner than the Board of Regents in trying to establish that policy platform to be able to launch non-credit. So looking forward to that. I know today, had we not had our board meeting scheduled on the same day as the Board of Regents, we would have had a couple of members of the Regent staff here to talk with us about the non-credit policy platform. But unfortunately, that schedule didn't play in our favor, and we'll be able to talk a little bit further about that in a bit.
Yeah, and I'll just say that's part of this case for support is really focusing on that for Board of Regents to understand our need.
Joe, this year we don't have to cover the unfunded mandate, so
Correct.
to speak. How much is that, and what percentage of in the past, have we had to accept or take care of? Would you guess?
Well, I mean, mandated costs run roughly $5 to $6 million, $8 million in some cases. And that's just on the bare minimum stuff, right? Outside of the whole idea of retirement increases that we've had to pay for UAL and things of that nature, which run in the tens of thousands of dollars. But it's kind of hit and miss, which makes things kind of erratic. It kind of is a matter of whether or not there are state funds available, right? So one year you get it, one year you don't. And it's just kind of being tugged left and right from year to year. In this case, we received funds. I'm trying to think. I think we received funding also last year. We've been fortunate in this case, but we've had a good run right now.
Right.
Years before that, it was not so much the case.
So in the cases where we would not receive it, what kind of, do you plan for it? Do you hold it in reserve?
As always, you plan for the worst, hope for the best. And that's why it's very important that you have to ensure that you have those cash balances somewhat available to be able to help offset that. It's just like with any business, right? The whole idea of every business has a reserve. If they don't have a reserve, they're not going to be in business too long. And it's for those unintended, unplanned events that occur, whether it's a hurricane that kind of wipes out the community and you lose all your student tuition, to the regular, just day-to-day stuff like these mandated cost increases that people have to bear.
Good, thank you.
Very good. All right, any other questions? Chandler, Joe, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's take a look at the college updates here. Bear with me. We'll go around the horn, beginning up at Northwest. We have Northwest Louisiana Technical Community College is partnering with SWEPCO for the Power Lineman program that they're launching on the Shreveport campus. On the Shreveport campus, is that what he said? Appreciate your support there. Very well done. Moving to Delgado, where the Delgado Dolphins won the Region 23 championship and went on to represent LCTCS and Delgado at the Junior College World Series, where they were 2-2 and wound up, I believe, in the third round of that national championship tournament, lost. Following that, we also have Bossier Parish Community College's softball team who won the Region 14 title. Went on to the College World Series, I believe, in Oxford, Alabama. The ladies did an incredible job there. What a showing. The thing that I'm most excited about is this is a young team. This is a team that I believe we're going to see play for a couple of years for championships. So very proud of the work going on in both of those locations. I want to stop for a second and say a word about athletics. Athletics is not a focus of our system, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a role. Athletics has a role. And that role for many of these young people, when you hear them talk about the role that softball played or baseball played, there's a young man whose father works at LED that I've gotten to know over the years. His son is just finishing his second year, at Tulane after 2 years at Delgado. And his comment to me was, I would not be earning a bachelor's degree if it weren't for playing baseball. And you know what? If that's what it takes to get that young person an education, then you know what? We'll do it. But very proud when our young people go out and represent us in the fashion that these two teams have. So thank you very much to those chancellors and to the athletes at both schools. All right, at Louisiana Delta, we had a ribbon cutting this past week for a simulated hospital in Bastrop. Think about this. The hospital is a $1.5 million investment that allows students to experience medical scenarios that they would normally not get experience with in rural hospital settings. So you can imagine you walk out of an education program from a practical nursing program at, let's just say, Central Louisiana Technical Community College, and you go to work at Hartner Medical Center, and you have no idea what an emergency room looks like. These students are getting that experience on the front end. Excited about what's going on there. Jumping down, if we can, to North Shore Technical Community College, where the college graduated its largest class at the spring 23 commencement. I think that must have been because of new leadership at North Shore. Is that what it was? The largest class graduates? That's great. Good stuff. 657 graduates, a 22% increase in summer enrollment. So Jim just continues to hit the ball out of the park. Central Louisiana Technical Community College had its most successful year ever with Louisiana Board of Regents endowments and matching scholarship fund program. These endowments were made possible by the generous investments of Alexandria Business Foundation, who gave $300,000 to the foundation at the college. These funds were invested for a total endowment of over $500,000 for the people of Central Louisiana. Very proud of the work going on at all of our colleges. So thank you to each one of you. With that, I'd like to shift to our board development segment. I'd like to ask, if we can, Susie Showen and Amy Cable, if you will join us. We have now, for the last couple of months, spent a brief period within each of our board meetings talking about the importance of non-credit. And I would begin today's segment before the ladies begin to spell out for you the policy platform that we're working on. I would simply say to you, that across the country, the fastest growing means by which people engage in education is not college credit. It is not enrolling in a fall term or a spring term and getting a degree. It is an industry-based certification approach. And so given that that is the case, we have to adjust as colleges, not away from credit, but in addition to the traditional college credit approach that we've had. So with that, let me turn it over and I'll begin with Amy.
Good morning, Chair Mount, Dr. Sullivan, and members of the board. This morning, I'm going to touch a little bit on the historical context around non-credit data collection and kind of where we are currently. And Susie's going to talk a little bit more about kind of the future of funding. So at past board meetings, you have approved non-credit programs by your consent agenda. And that is just one of the many steps that it takes to kind of make that shift to really focusing on the non-credit credential. There's a huge shift in higher education to really go away from that traditional bachelor degree and really shift to those non-credit programs. Employers, students, and policymakers are really interested in these alternatives, especially in the light of COVID. What we found is that community colleges in particular in that non-credit space are very nimble. We can move and shift very easily in this space, and we can meet the market demand as industry needs it, right? And we're able to connect students with those industry-based credentials with jobs. Sorry, let me do the slide here. That would probably help. Non-credit credentials take place in many, many different forms. So you have industry-based certifications such as NCCER, occupational licensures such as certified nursing assistant. You have apprenticeships through teaching and plumbing and HVAC. And again, non-credit programs are nimble enough. And if you recall during COVID, our colleges were able to meet the healthcare demand because when COVID was happening and we had all of these shortages, we were able to pump out as many healthcare, providers as we possibly could. We were also able to, help with equipment and supplies in that space because of our non-credit impact. Non-credit credentials offer opportunities for individuals to better navigate today's ever-shifting technology, social, economic, and regulatory environments. Okay, so AACC and Strata estimate that over 40% of adults reported having a non-degree credential, post-secondary certificate, or a certification or licensure. So, and this is compared to 46% who have completed a college degree. But despite its recent increase in relevancy, non-credit is still considered the hidden college. There is a lack of consistent data, the way that we collect data, data definitions, and more importantly, the funding around non-credit. Students who are in that non-credit space aren't typically eligible for federal financial aid like the Pell Grant. So we're relying on these other standalone resources from a student perspective, but from an institution perspective, we don't have a funding model to support that. So essentially your non-credit program is kind of having to figure out how to make money on their own. But it's growing even faster than our credit bearing programs, and we're getting state support from that space. So we need to be able to, remove that gap between those two. There's been a lot of studies in the past, probably in the last 5 years, more importantly, around the history of around data collection of non-credit. So Opportunity for America had a study in 2020 that really focused on 1,200 institutions, and its purpose was really to kind of explore what are the major differences between a community college and the traditional four-year public institution. And that survey highlighted really the non-credit credential earner. So 54% of the students are in job-focused programs. States are prioritizing the workforce education. And credit and non-credit programs are moving into a place where they're preparing students for those industry-based certificates and to put people to work. There are other national studies, including the National Skills Coalition, Rutgers, the National Center for Education Statistics, and those studies have focused on defining the non-credit funding opportunities and transferability from credit to non-credit. And Louisiana has been a part of many of those studies, including the Rutgers one. We have started to track, Louisiana has started to track kind of the progress around salaries and what, industry-based certificates in the salary component. And while it doesn't have an exact accurate picture, we are seeing that there is a connection between those two things. And then Louisiana, LCTCS in particular, began a data conversion in 2020 so that we could really start collecting the data, because we want to be able to tell a holistic picture of what our colleges are doing, both for credit and non-credit, so that we can make the case to the state that we need this more, we need more funding. Okay, so data equals quality, it equals accountability, and it equals funding opportunities, particularly through those standalone funds like the MJ Foster Promise. If we had no data collection method, we would not have opportunities to tap into those types of dollars. It also supports funding like short-term Pell and then a larger funding formula model. So again, it's going to help those employers really understand, that these people are hireable and that, we're meeting the demand of the labor market. Collecting student data can help institutions improve an area of a college that has been significantly increasing in enrollment, and the assessment of that non-credit data can establish and enhance routine data collection concerning non-credit credentials and document the contribution of non-credit to those economic development. So Louisiana is not alone when it comes to data collection and funding for non-credit. In fact, we are kind of the leader nationally. So we're far ahead of some states. There are some states who have no idea where to begin in this space, and we are acting kind of as mentors for those states to try to help them figure out how to move into the space of data collection. So there's been growing recognition of a need for longitudinal studies. Lumina, Bill and Melinda Gates, the U.S. Department of Education and Labor, they've all been focusing on millions of dollars to really start focusing on this work. Louisiana, along with Iowa, Virginia, and are participating in a study through Rutgers. And we're reviewing kind of like non-credit data, really digging into defining what that is and how we're reporting that up to the state. But again, we're also being mentors to other states across the country to help them figure out how to make this work. States such as New Jersey have started creating an industry valued credential list to help students chart a path to a career, and we have something very similar here as well. And Texas, California, and Iowa have set precedent to support state funding model that supports non-credentials, and we're hoping that Louisiana follows suit. So at this time, I will turn it over to Susie to discuss the future of workforce funding.
Thank you very much, Amy, and Chair Mount, Monty, and the supervisors. Thank you for having us here to talk about this. I want to kind of frame the conversation, talk about a few concepts that tend to enter into this space. So Amy has mentioned quality. There's been a real push nationally around identifying credentials of value, and this has circled around the concept of non-credit programming, because the assumption is that all credit programs provide credentials of value due to the accreditation process. I am not personally persuaded by that argument, but that is a separate issue. The issue that we are talking about here is non-credit credentials and ensuring that those are credentials of value. And there are a few initiatives in the state that I'm going to talk about in just a moment that tie into that. But really why this comes into the conversation of funding is a lot of the conversation around funding non-credit credentials has come to land on the need to identify credentials of value. There is an interest in funding non-credit credentials of value, but there are a whole lot of nonsense non-credit credentials out there, and we want to make sure that those are distinct. So there's this concept of making sure that we're targeting these funds appropriately in ways that will positively impact the prosperity of our students and our communities. So that's an important part of the question. I also want to draw a distinction between student financial aid and institutional funding. Those two things are very different in all higher education funding spaces. And we have had some progress recently with MJ Foster Promise, TOPS Tech, and so on in terms of student financial aid for non-credit programming, but that's not the whole story. And really what we're focused on here today is the funding, the institutional funding, where funding flows to our colleges in order to support these programs from the back end. Some of that funding may end up going to students, but it doesn't have to. It's at the discretion of LCTCS and the institutions. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. So to Supervisor Smith's question earlier about funding for non-credit programming in the current legislature. There was an ask for a recurring part of the funding formula to support non-credit programming. That hasn't happened yet, but we do remain optimistic, given the support that we're seeing from our friends at the Board of Regents, that that will eventually be part of the story. What we have seen from the last legislative session and from this one is one-time funding that provides LCTCS with a lot of discretion on how to fund these programs. So our reboot program, and we've provided you with some periodic updates from the reboot program, really provides us with a good foundation in terms of results and data for how we might target non-credit workforce funding in the most effective way possible. So that's what we're going to talk about for this conversation. This year, the Board of Regents received $15.5 million in what's called a Higher Education Initiatives Fund. The details of how that fund will be distributed and used are still being worked out, but we are talking to the Board of Regents about how we would like to allocate, how we would like to apply a sort of prototype funding formula to our portion of that fund. And so that's where we are with the Board of Regents, and we've been having some really productive conversations with them. So with that said, let me back up now and talk about some of the ways in which we're addressing these issues right now in Louisiana. For many years, the IBC Council, which is part of the Workforce Investment Council, which is our state workforce board. The IBC Council has been involved in vetting IBCs to ensure that they are relevant to the market here in Louisiana and that they will get a student, either get a holder of that credential, a job that they wouldn't otherwise get, or get them a higher wage than they would have otherwise have received versus an identical candidate without that credential. The IBC Council provides a list of IBCs that have been vetted according to those criteria. And once a year, Bessie approves the current version of that list to serve as the state focus list for the Jumpstart program. So the IBC Council provides the initial vetting, and then those IBCs are the ones that are approved to be culminating credentials in the Jumpstart program, which is the state's career and technical education program for K-12 students. So that produces the state focus list. We at LCTCS recognize that our story is a little bit different from K-12. So we have some credentials that we have added to our list of IBCs that we provide to our students at LCTCS, some of which are not really applicable to K-12 students and so forth. So we have a slightly different list than that. The Regents Master Plan comes into this conversation in two different ways. The Master Plan has produced a set of very aggressive educational attainment goals over the next few years. So the goal is 60% of our adult working age population to have a credential of value by 2030. So 60 by 30. That requires a pretty aggressive increase in the number of credentials that are produced. And I'll show you a chart of those projected increases in just a moment. That requires that non-credit credentials of value be included in that educational attainment goal. So the Board of Regents has formally recognized that non-credit credentials count towards educational attainment in an important way and will be included in their master plan goals and in their master plan results. That means that they need a definition of credentials of value. So there is a formal definition of credentials of value in Louisiana developed by the Board of Regents, but that is not necessarily always the metric that LCTCS uses to measure what's important to us. So there's a little bit of a distinction there because we need to be very nimble and very market responsive, and sometimes that doesn't quite catch up. We also participate in a number of national conversations, both Amy and I and several other members of our team work pretty extensively with national organizations on developing and formalizing definitions of credentials of value, talking about workforce funding models and so forth. And in fact, we're involved in some of those right now. And then at the national level, the conversation around the need for workforce Pell, which again is on that student financial aid side. So this is on the top line, the Regents master plan projections for what they need to reach their 60 by 30 goal. We will need to, throughout the entire higher education system in Louisiana, by 2030, produce an additional produce annually 85,000 completers. If we are going to get there, LCTCS is going to contribute a pretty significant portion of those goals.
So if I may, just one quick comment. Board members, you are familiar with the concept of 127. 127 says that for one professional engineering position, it is supported by 2 individuals with baccalaureate degrees and 7 individuals as technicians. So when you look at this chart and begin to understand that Regents is looking at 85,000 graduates, we own 50,000 of those 85,000 annual graduates. Let that sink in, because that is the 7s. It's very, very simple when you think about it in those terms. What is not simple is doubling graduates, because that's effectively what we're being asked to do from 21-22 at 26,000 up to 50,000. It is a huge, huge undertaking, but yet one that must happen. Susie?
And we can do it because we can do it through the expansion of the non-credit credentials. The flexibility that those credentials offer us is what gives us the opportunity to drive this growth. So I'm going to offer you for your enjoyment a clear and simple representation of the current Board of Regents funding formula. And this is essentially, well, yes, it's complicated. And so when we're looking at the development of a non-credit funding formula that would mirror and nest within this current funding formula, that's not a straightforward or overnight process. So that's not what we're looking to do with that current portion of the Higher Education Initiatives Fund. What we are looking to do with that Higher Education Initiatives Fund, and you're going to like this slide much better once it comes up. There we go, is a far more straightforward set of operating principles with which we want to focus workforce funds that come from the Board of Regents to us. And particularly this year, because we know we're going to receive a smaller portion of funding than we have in the past, it is especially important for us to be very strategic and very focused with those funds. So I've been talking about credentials of value, but it is true that not all credentials of value have the same economic impact on a student or on a community. It's very important in times of limited resources that we strategically focus those resources on those credentials that are going to make the biggest difference to the health of our economy, to the health of our people, and to the economic prosperity of the people that acquire those credentials. So that's the idea here, is to be very strategically focused on those things that have the biggest impact. That requires us to work with our community leaders in all the regions of the state, because there are different flavors of economic need in each region of the state. We talk about this often. Manufacturing in Northwest Louisiana looks different than manufacturing in Southwest Louisiana, and that looks different from what manufacturing looks like in Southeast Louisiana. We need to be working with people who understand the need in each of our communities. We need to work with our economic developers. Economic developers are forward-looking. Funding models tend to be backward-looking. So we want to make sure that we are understanding the credentials that we need now and we're going to need in the future. Our economic developers can help us understand where their members are hurting the most right now, where their industry partners need to be able to acquire enough workers to take advantage of certain opportunities that might be in front of them. We know right now, with a lot of federal funding coming into the state and ongoing industrial growth, just economic growth in our communities, that we have a whole lot of needs that we're going to need to be able to meet, jobs that haven't showed up in the economy yet. And our economic developers can help us understand where and when those are going to happen. Industry partners as well can give us very detailed information on what they need to hire for and when. And without that understanding, we won't be able to meet their needs. But because these non-credit credentials provide us such nimbleness, we can respond in real time to what it is that they need. So working with these community partners to identify the credentials that mean the most in the community right now, where people are hiring right now and they're paying good wages right now, is step number one and absolutely the most important part. We want to focus this funding, again, being very targeted on credentials that will get somebody to the first job or the next job. But upskilling of incumbent workers does have other funding sources. It remains an incredibly important part of what we do, but with these dollars, we need to focus on getting people into that job or into that next job up the ladder. We want to provide funding based on results, not promises. We do not fund based on enrollments. We fund based on completers. So we do have the Rapid Response Training Fund that is intended to provide operational support to develop or expand new programs to respond to emerging trends. That's what that's for. That is not what this is for. This is for producing credentials and getting people to work or to better work. And we need to focus it in that way. And that means we are paying for, we are reimbursing the colleges based on credential production and not based on either enrollments or on plans. Once they have those dollars, we want to give them maximum flexibility. So the idea is we want to produce as many of these high quality credentials, these high impact credentials as possible. And our colleges know better than anybody what's preventing them from doing that. In some cases, for our commercial driver's license programs, in many cases, those are very expensive. And so reducing the cost of tuition for our students might be the best way to allow them to expand those programs to get more people in the door. But it also might be that they need to buy another truck. So they're going to know better than we do whether that truck is holding them back from expanding those programs to their maximum potential. So we want to give them flexibility to be strategic with the expenditures of those funds. And then we need to make sure that we're braiding our funds effectively. There's a lot of funding out there right now, and we need to make sure that we're taking advantage of that in the best possible way. If we are focusing these dollars in the right way, then we can partner with our friends in the WIOA system to provide wraparound services. We can partner with people in the Children and Family Services system who are now dealing with a lot of folks whose work requirements are coming back on board. We can work with them to make sure we're getting those folks through our programs and into work and taking advantage of the employment and training funds that they have available. There's a lot of funds out there that we have not necessarily maximized, and then the Rapid Response Training Fund that I mentioned. So this is the general set of principles that we are planning to apply to the deployment of funds that we received this year, and then organize these principles into the complicated data system that I illustrated earlier, but without losing the magic of what comes here, the market responsiveness, the economic impact to the students, and the flexibility, making sure that we retain all of that within that complicated framework.
Questions?
So that what you've just described to us, which was an excellent presentation, has that already been presented to the Board of Regents, or are you planning to present that to the Board of Regents?
We've had discussions, and I literally talked with Tristan yesterday about this concept. So we have had the concepts that they should not be developing the funding formula for our portion of those dollars yet, because we have already done the work.
So you were in communicating yesterday, then they've accepted our plan, if you will,
I-
for how we spend the funds?
I think there's still some work to be done before I would say that they have accepted our plan.
Okay,
But I don't think we've had any conversations that would indicate that this is not, that this would be outside of what they're expecting. I should also say, because this really is the reboot model, it's not new to them and it's not new to us.
and then what sort of time frame are you assuming? I mean, not that we're in control, but that we would know exactly if we got the funding for this.
Yeah, I know they're working through that at the Board of Regents.
Yeah, so it may be driven by the dollars that were allocated. So this time the 15.5, and Joe, help me, keep me straight here. 15.5 million was surplus money from the 21-22
Yeah.
fiscal year, which means that it has to be allocated before June 30 of this year. So it may speed this thing up pretty quickly. And so putting in their hands a set of guidelines like we've just talked about, that was really the goal, was to put it in their hands today, knowing full well that they only have about 15 days to allocate the dollars.
So that's encouraging. I mean, it could happen sooner than later, right?
I think it has to, yes, happen sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And nobody is looking to overcomplicate this process, right? This is one-time money. They're going to want to get it out there, have it make
Right.
an impact. And
Thank you.
And one thing I'll mention is that we started sending our non-credit data to the Board of Regents last year in October, and we'll be doing that continuously. So from a data collection standpoint, they're ready for us. So whenever that
Yep.
funding formula model is approved, essentially, we'll be able to already seamlessly provide our credentials to them so that they can support that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So a completer is an array of certificates or a certificate that lets someone go to work?
so either, as long as it lets someone go to work.
Right. So electrician, NCCR electrician level 3 is go to work.
Yes.
Level
absolutely.
2 is go to work.
Yeah.
Level 1 could be go to work. And then upskilling would be going to 2 to 3 but
Well,
that's
if-
one of your from
If
26,000 to
it moves
50,000.
them up the ladder
Right.
in the company.
And it will.
Then yes.
Absolutely.
Then those would qualify. Absolutely.
So really, one non-credit really is a force multiplier for getting a job
Yep.
versus a 4-year that's going to be someone who's going to complete an array of things and
Mhm.
The
we're
thing
really
to-
doing this in so many
Stackability
places. I
is
mean, it was just,
part of
no
it.
one respects it or recognizes.
And a lot of our work
Should know
is,
that.
Well, we're singing the same song.
Yeah.
and a lot of our work it's about stackability, right? So get them as many as non-credit credentials as we can, see if we can then move them to the credit side of the house. And it creates a cycle of funding for our colleges, right? So if we have funding for non-credit, we can track them to the credit side of the house. We have more funding on that side. And at the same time, we're moving that person up in salary and credentials.
So on your term upskilling, which I really like, do you get to count that as well on the statistics? Meaning, to
Yes,
your
if-
point,
Mhm.
it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. Is that 3?
If they
So-
get a bump, if they get a bump and pay or move up. in
You get
position.
another point, or it
Similar to-
counts.
Yeah, and
Right?
generally, so it depends on whether they're doing that in the same year, right?
Mhm.
So
Okay.
generally speaking, we're going to look at one credential per person per year.
Okay.
And then, but if with these NCCER credentials, they're rarely going to go all the way up the ladder in a year. So you would be able to count those as they move
Okay.
forward and up the ladder.
One thing I want to mention to you, if you go back to the slide, and you don't have to pull it back up, but if you go back to the slide that has the funding formula breakouts, there are a few things that we took from Regents. And so in particular, you'll notice that under 2-year colleges, 30% of the total model is pushed out by outcomes. 30%. What we're saying is the non-credit side of this thing, 100% of the
Yes.
funds will be pushed out
Mhm.
according to outcomes. And so from a Regents point of view, they love it because that effectively is us helping them accomplish their goal. The second part that I would mention to you is the alignment component. Amy mentioned it early on, the STAR rating system that Susie was so instrumental in creating a number of years ago. That is a basic building block what you're beginning to see now is people asking questions at a federal level that say, when will we be ready as a sector to now stand this up and ensure that we have federal Pell money to support students on the non-credit side? So in many ways, this is a proof of concept. We know that it works. We've been doing this for years, but as you heard a few minutes ago, it's the hidden college. It's unfortunate, but I think it's going to be the future. But other questions or comments?
So, and you hit on this, a couple of questions. Well, first off, the data collection aspect of it, we have most of this data. I'm a little surprised that we don't have a handle on most of this data already, or do we?
We do now.
Okay.
Prior to 2020, we did not. I mean,
Okay.
I think we were collecting non-credit data, but it was in a separate data instance.
Okay.
And there was no standardization around what data was put in that system. And so, for example, you need a social security number or an identifier to then connect that student with salary. When we report that information to the Workforce Commission, if we don't have that data, we can't know if that credential provided an increase in their salary. So the new data collection system, because we're using our system of record, which is Banner, that collects a social security number. So we have just more complete data. Prior to 2020, I would say we probably had 15% of the data, like demographic data that we needed. And now we're far ahead of the game. We're probably at 60 or 70% now.
Wow.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. I did focus in on, again, the strategy of it being a reimbursement for results as opposed to seed money. And I appreciate the principle behind that. So the question comes in my mind, first off, is can our schools afford to be progressive in these areas and then draw in the students, right? Because the burden is on the schools to develop these programs, and we'll pay you later for it, right? Go generate all these folks. And I know we're already in the business already, but if we want to grow it, then you got to go invest and grow it. And again, I think this year in particular, it sounds like financially we're in as good a shape as we've been in a few years, right? Just generally speaking, everybody. So probably a little bit less concerned about that. But in years past, that would have been a struggle to front end it.
And I would say we do have the Rapid Response Fund, which is intended to provide people with the resources to expand or create programs.
Okay.
So the idea here, generally speaking, is either they can use Rapid Response to do that, or these are existing programs. So they should have the capacity to be able to generate these folks. And we've been providing them with the reimbursement on a quarterly basis. So in terms of reinvestments to do sort of less dramatic expansions than a rapid response might require, they should be getting those funds in on a good basis.
So the other question I have, and I appreciate that. The other question I have is if the challenge is accessibility for the students, it's on the schools in this model to figure out how to overcome that challenge. And I'm particularly talking about paying the tuition that may be due, right? I mean, that's the way this model is set up is, again, and we know that is a challenge, right? That if you don't have the resources to go and pay tuition for one of these courses, it's hard for you to go enroll in it. So there are other programs we have. I mean, we're frankly providing it for free. We've done that over the past for several different programs. But that's not the way, unless a school decides to do that with their resources now, that's not particularly necessarily part of this program, right? That's a school decision.
Well, it is a school decision, but I would also say we have other resources like MJ Foster Promise.
Right,
And with
right.
the shifts in that, I think
Right.
we're confident that there's going to be a lot more uptake there so that they will have those resources available. In many cases, our colleges are reducing the cost of attendance for these programs. And I would say, especially for the more costly programs, some of these programs are already pretty reasonably priced. And if a student is eligible for some of these other programs, they're going to have their full cost of attendance covered. So we want to make sure that we're leaving that flexibility in where the colleges are able to use these funds for other reasons, if that's really going to be where the need is. And I will say, the programs that we've been really heavily emphasized are the commercial driver's license programs, the heavy equipment operators, a lot of these other skilled trade programs that are very expensive and have very expensive equipment. And that's historically been the major obstacle for expanding these programs.
Yeah, and again, I think the problem is if you got to buy a truck, which is your example, you got to go. I mean, Jesus, what's one of them trucks cost now? It's $100,000. I mean,
Yeah,
you gotta
at
go, you gotta go
least.
find 100
Yeah.
grand. And then in theory, we'll give you some money back, even quarterly, as you say, but you better have 100 grand when you want to go get the truck, right? You're not buying a truck on credit. So that's a challenge. Right? I'm not disagreeing with the model. That's a challenge, but this year is probably the best year for us to have
do
to
it.
deal with that challenge. Gosh, I had another thought, but I'll be quiet for now.
We can always come back to you.
Yep.
We'll be here.
Well, I think other questions or comments from the group? Thank you to Amy and to Susie for the presentation. I think what's most important for us to keep in mind from a policy point of view is that we are creating this policy platform as we launch. It's not the perfect way to do it. We'd love to be able to build the perfect mousetrap and then go implement, but that's not what the market requires. And so we've been out there proving this point to people for years now. We're excited to put it in place and to see where it's going to go. And as you can see from these two individuals and the team behind them, this is the right group of people to get this done. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Dr. Sullivan, before we let, so the last question is, this allocation is at Board of Regents, and we're going to participate in a portion of it. A portion of it is going to other higher education institutions in the state.
Yes,
So
that's
my
the assumption,
historical experience,
unless
right?
they decide to give it all to us.
Right. Well, of course, my historical experience is non-credit courses at some of the other schools are not as valuable as probably the ones we provide, because you can go take some non-credit courses at other schools that have no value, right, everybody? And that's not the same thing as getting a truck driver's CDL.
That is correct. And I don't think the Board of Regents is accepting non-credit data from any other institution in the state at this time because we have the infrastructure to provide that data collection. The other colleges and systems do not. And so I think that's a benefit and a leg up for us because we can provide that information to them.
And I do also want to say, to my knowledge, there's nothing in the Higher Education Initiatives Fund that requires it to be spent on non-credit programming. That's where we see the need. That's where we see the focus,
All right.
but the other folks may decide differently.
Is that all, Stevie? Okay. Great job. Thank y'all so much for all your hard work. Very impressive.
Thank
Can't wait to hear the good news.
you. We'll come back to you.
All right.
All right. Madam Chair, that wraps up the President's report and board development. I'll turn it back to you for general action items.
All right. Thank you so much. I'd like to call on Supervisor Jennifer Lee, who will present the academic action items for consideration by the board. Let me mention to the board that Supervisor Hardy, Roman Hardy, could not be here this morning. Really became quite ill last night. So we hope he feels better soon. With that, Supervisor Lee.
Good morning. As a representative of Supervisor Roman Hardy, who's the chair of the Academic, Workforce, and Student Affairs Committee, I move to suspend the rules allowing for academic items J2 through J5 to be considered for action instead of review and advisement. Are there any objections?
Well, you need a motion and ask for a motion
Um,
and a second.
Right, hearing no objection, academic items J2 through J5 will be considered for action. And Chancellor Saltel and Bill Tulak will present the accreditation item that's following.
Two guys, I tell you, they should have been a tag team at some point, right? The tag team of Tulak and Saltel, right? Starsky and Hutch. There you go. I like it. I like it. Forgotten about that one. Man, that goes way back. All right. The academic, the accreditation update, as you are aware, each monthly meeting, we provide you with an update on where we stand with both Central as well as with Northwest. Continue to see incredible progress there. Bill, I want to specifically call out your work in this space. You have done an incredible job at not just with Central, but with Northwest 3 times over now. So very much appreciate all the great work going on there. So with that, I'll turn to Chancellor Saltel and ask for a quick update on the SACS goings on.
Good morning, Chair Mount, members of the board, Dr. Sullivan. It's an honor to be here. And we're very pleased to share several updates. Before I get into the accreditation update, I do want to share that we are in the middle of a pharmacy technician program programmatic update, and we are bringing on a new farm tech program to the Alexandria campus. in the fall, and we are in the middle of having two programs that are programmatically accredited under one umbrella. And that is, they had a visit with us last April of this year, and we're going to put all that together and sew that up in August for a fall to have two locations programmatically accredited. So with that, we're trying to put together the timeline. We're kind of in the middle of a lot of exciting things. And tomorrow or Friday, we will find out from SACS COC their rendering on their April 2023 visit to CLTCC. So as soon as we know that, we will share that with you, and that will set forth, if it's approved, that will set forth a domino effect. Can't thank the team at SACS COC enough for their hand holding and their guiding us through this maiden voyage for us. So we find out good news this week. We will certainly share it with you first. And then from that point, we will talk about continuing with certain events that will roll out as follows. So this week, we also officially started what is our fifth consecutive year engagement with the Louisiana Legislative Auditors, and they are going to be with us from now and hopefully have their final rendering on this fourth consecutive full scope, fifth overall by February-ish of next year. We cannot thank them enough. They have literally put us on the agenda for ensuing years so that we can time the market, if you will, so that the calendar works in the right direction. So they've started yesterday. Officially, we had our entrance interview, and that will roll out through February of next year, which will then roll into a potential April of next year's SACS COC visit, which would be the second of two and the third of three major events. And then we would have that rendering June of 2024. So with that, that's kind of the timeline. Audit from now until February, all documentations to SACS COC late February, early March, and then an April visit if everything's approved tomorrow. We simply cannot thank enough this Board of Supervisors. Dr. Sullivan, thank you, sir, for all that you've done in some pretty choppy waters, from fiscal cliff to COVID to everything else. Your team, I certainly want to echo your sentiments to my friend Bill Tulak and all that he's done for two colleges in this season, and sister colleges that have come to help us out, every one of them, every single one of them. And of course, to our Bobcat team at CLTCC back home, who puts their nose to the grindstone every day for this initiative. So with that, when the time is right, we're open for any questions.
Chancellor Saltel, if I may, I just want to clarify one quick item.
Yes, sir.
When we began this journey, we had a conversation about what's the goal. And the goal, I'm sure that this board could articulate pretty clearly, is accreditation. But the really important point here is that the college is COE accredited and is effectively changing accreditors and changing the means by which students are able to get federal financial aid. That interim step of candidacy, which we'll learn about next week, is the goal. So I just want to pause for a second and say to the central team, this week you're going to learn news on one of the biggest steps that this college has taken in its young tenure. Congratulations to you and the team on one hell of a job. I know we're not there yet. I know Dr. Whelan might call me out a bit if I were to say too much, so I won't. But I can tell you this team was impressed. They were impressed that this is a community that started a college and that stuck with it, because far too often what they've seen is Band-Aids and chewing gum sticking colleges together in a community saying, come give us accreditation. That's not what we got at Central. We got a solid college. So Chancellor Saltel, thank you.
Mr. President, I love to use this quote. It is one of the quotes that should be etched in stone in our system. Anybody who sees a turtle on a fence post knows that it did not get there on its own. So thank y'all very, very much for everything that y'all done. Supervisor Murphy, it fits every momentous occasion. So thank you, sir.
You had to keep crawling to get there. All right, Bill.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Mount, Dr. Sullivan. I'll give a presentation here on behalf of Chancellor Spillers. Northwest is making considerable progress towards SACS COC accreditation. The college has submitted an application and then received a written response analysis back from the SACS staff with some recommendations, which is very common. And it was a very good review. And then on June 7th, they had a virtual meeting with the staff, going over those items and planning out the future. So they're sort of on track now. They got some traction and they'll plan it out. So Where are we? They're going to have to make revisions, and the plan is to submit the revisions by January 15th. They'll need a fiscal year 23 audit, and that'll be due in April. And after that's submitted, the hope is that they will be on the June agenda for SAC-COC and the commission, and they'll be recommended for candidacy committee. And so in June, if everything goes well, they'll be approved for committee, and the committee will come out and start the process as happened with Central. I'm very impressed with where they are, and they have a lot of challenges though, but I want to remind you that they're still COE accredited, and they have a visit in September 5th and 8th. So they're busy preparing for a COE visit and trying to plan out in the future. So once they get that visit done, they'll be able to focus all their efforts on the SACS accreditation. And throughout this process, the timeline is going to be heavily dependent upon audits, unfortunately, and the challenges that Central had. And we'll try to work with the colleges to accelerate that, but not being able to get an audit before November is always a challenge. So a lot of our actions will end up on June agendas as opposed to December agendas. So that will slow us down a bit, but we're making great progress.
Excellent. Very good. Any questions for Chancellor Saltel or Bill Tulak?
Bill, so the deadline, so you're waiting on the legislative order to schedule?
Well, no, we have to make sure we have an audit by April 1st, which is a doable one. What we would like to do is be on the December agenda, and we'd have to have an audit like in October, which is almost an impossibility.
Okay.
You know, Central pulled the rabbit out of their hat with an audit. We will try to do that again with Northwest. This is probably not the year to do it because of the COE accreditation that's coming in and some other issues. But hopefully, after the June, we'll try to shoot for the December, and we'll try to get that audit in so we can speed this process up.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chancellor and Bill, for your information on the accreditation. And Ms. Cable's back and will tell us about some revisions to the LCTCS policies.
Yes. So good morning again, Chairman, Dr. Sullivan, and members of the board. We have several that we're going to go over this morning. So the first is the revisions to LCTCS policy 1.001, degrees, diplomas, and awards. The current policy only lists one certificate, the Certificate of Applied Science, that can be awarded posthumously. The revision includes the option to award all degrees and certificates posthumously. So it just expands the college's ability to award multiple degrees. So staff recommends that the board approve the revisions to LCTCS policy 1.001, degrees, diplomas, and awards.
Motion by Smith. Second by Toops.
No, that's you're chairing this. So,
All right.
so just, or if there are no objections. then
Yeah, if there are no
I'll-
objections, motion carries. Sorry.
That's okay. It's good. You got it.
All right. The next is on accreditation. So this is policy 1.011 accreditation. The current policy was written when there were two accreditors, SAC-COC and COE. We're aligning the policy to reflect that SAC-COC is the preferred institutional accrediting body, as evidenced by the work that is occurring at CLTCC and Northwest. So staff recommends that the board approve the revisions to LCTCS policy 1.011 accreditation.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion by Salah. Second by Jackson.
Any objections? All right, motion carries.
All right. The next is the revisions to LCTCS policy 1.031 academic calendar and census policy or census date policy. I will just say that this one has been in the making for many years now. As we continue to implement new funding models and streamline processes related to student onboarding, retention, and completion, it is important for us to identify areas where consistency is beneficial to students, and an updated academic calendar policy will ensure that application and registration dates are consistent between all LCTCS institutions. So staff recommends that the board approve the revisions to LCTCS policy 1.031 academic calendar and census date.
Motion to revise
Butler McIntyre.
LCTCS policy 1.031.
By Butler McIntyre, second by Zarang.
Questions? All right, motion carries.
And I would be remiss to not say that Renee Centron would be so proud that this policy finally passed. So we were working on it since then. So I just would want to make sure we recognize him. Erin?
Good morning, Chair Mount, Dr. Sullivan, members of the board. I'm Erin Landry. I'm the Executive Director of Adult Education for the system. So it's nice to see you. I'm here for policy 1.105, the high school equivalency policy. The current policy needs updates around its placement, methods of attainment for high school equivalency. And so really we're aligning to Board of Regents placement policy for students who earn a high school equivalency through college preparation coursework or college placement assessments, and then clarifying language in the integrated career pathway section that an industry-based certification earned should align with the integrated pathway that the student is in. And so those are the adjustments that are recommended. So staff recommends that the board approve the attached revisions to LCTCS policy 1.105, Work Ready U high school equivalency.
Motion by Salath, second by Toots.
Any objections? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Amy and Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Lee. Is that all?
That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Supervisor Salath to present the facilities action item for consideration by the board.
Thank you, Madam. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. The facilities action item for consideration is the demolition of buildings at Delgado Community College on the Jefferson Parish campus. Joe?
Yes, sir. Good morning, all members of the board and Supervisor Salath. If you recall, at the last board meeting, we had a presentation before you regarding an agreement or a relationship we are establishing with ComCare to reestablish and basically transform the Blair campus of Delgado Community College. ComCare is a assisted living facility provider across the state. They have come forward with a plan to, in essence, asking us to demolish the site. It's two buildings, roughly encompassing about 100,000 square feet, so that they can rebuild a site that will also provide itself as a learning center for Delgado's allied health programs. And not only at that site, but actually at all sites. They have, I think, 3 or 4 other sites located in New Orleans, throughout New Orleans. So given that this is a process that takes some time, we are coming before you asking permission to approve this demolition. We will have to go to FP&C. We will have to notify legislative members in that district of the intended demolition and so forth and get feedback from them as well. So again, given that that's a lengthy process, we've come before you to request this demolition. Staff recommends that the board authorize the president and the chancellor of Delgado Community College to execute all documents necessary to demolish 2 buildings at Jefferson campus located at 5200 Blair Drive, Metairie. The Office of Facility Planning and Control must approve the demolition of this building.
You heard the recommendation. Have a motion?
Motion by Butler McIntyre, second by Zarang.
Is there any discussion on this item? It's significant. Hearing no discussion, the motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam.
Thank you, Supervisor Salath. Now we'll go to Supervisor Chip Jackson to present the finance action items for consideration by the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 items. The first, authorizing naming rights for North Shore Technical Community College.
Yes, sir. We have an item, a request that was made by North Shore Technical Community College. This is an item that is under finance normally because there are donations associated with naming rights. In this case, we are having a request to provide naming rights for spaces within each of the 6 campuses for the learning centers at North Shore Technical Community College in recognition of the service, longtime service of Dr. William Wainwright. Just as a point of order, note, Senator Mount, as you may recall, you were the one who sponsored a bill in the past that restricted the naming rights to living individuals.
Yeah.
However, there is a section of law that was amended in 2013 that provides that for higher education, that does provide naming rights are possible for living individuals, given their contributions to that institution. And to my right, I'll pass it over to Dr. Carlson, since they're the ones who made the ask.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And thank you for having me here today. As you know, Dr. Wainwright became the new president of Southeastern Louisiana University recently, in a way for us to recognize his 24 years of service to LCTCS, and specifically 17 years as the leader of NTCC, 5 as the regional director, then 12 years as our only chancellor of the college. We wanted to do something special. So anyone that knows Dr. Wainwright knows that he was all about the success of our students. And we decided that we felt like if we could name our success centers, which is where everybody comes into when they first enter the college to get onboarded, to change the terms Student Success Center to the William S. Wainwright Student Success Centers. And we have those at all 5 locations of campuses, as well as our program at Southeastern Louisiana University, which is a additional site. So if we could do that, I think it'd be a great way for people to remember his legacy, but also a good reminder for all of our students that you can begin anywhere and get to wherever you want to go. So if that's the will of the board, we would like to make that happen.
If I may, just a quick update, you do have at your place the backup item. We did not want to post that item electronically, as we wanted this to be an opportunity for the college to surprise the chancellor. So I would ask that all of you here keep the secret. And so, but you
Yeah,
have that
hopefully
item.
he's not watching.
Will, if you're watching, quit.
I second.
Okay, I guess we don't need.
Got to get some control here.
Well, first off, I'm glad somebody clarified that the law's been changed. I thought something happened to Chancellor Wainwright that I didn't know about today. It's a rough crowd over there in Hammond, right? God knows we could have him on the first day on the job over there.
If you like, I'll read the recommendation
Yeah,
just for the
Joe, you wanna
record. Staff recommends that the student learning centers at the campuses of North Shore Technical Community College be named the, quote, William S. Wainwright Student Success Center, unquote, after former Chancellor Wainwright, in recognition of his lengthy and distinguished years of prolific service to North Shore Technical Community College.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion passed. Thank you. Our next item is tuition and mandatory fees for academic year 2023-24.
Right. Yes, sir. So this one's a little bit different than we've done in the past. In the past, we've had this item brought up before you, particularly as it pertains to just student credit hour production. And since 2016, we've held the line with not increasing tuition over the course of many years, obviously to keeping in mind that affordability is an ongoing concern for our students, given income levels and poverty levels within the state of Louisiana. But in addition to that, there have been discussions regarding how do we handle dual enrollment students with public and private secondary school systems, and also how do we handle home study students who are not affiliated with those secondary institutions. In the past, we've taken action. At the last meeting in June, we took some motion that was recorded in the minutes, not in the board item itself, but in the minutes regarding dual enrollment. So what we are doing here, in essence, is memorializing all 3 facets: your regular student credit hour students, your dual enrollment related to students who are enrolled in secondary school systems, and dual enrollment related to those students who are not enrolled in secondary school systems but are in home study programs, to put it out there once and for all as one board item with a nice bow and ribbon, so that in the future, as people move forward, we have something we can point to, not only for our institutions, but also for the public. Are there any questions? I'd be happy to answer. If not, then this will be a little bit lengthy. Staff recommends that the board not increase traditional credit hour tuition and mandatory fees at LCTCS colleges for academic year 23-24. Staff also recommends that tuition and fees for dual enrolled students at public or private secondary schools be set at the traditional credit hour rate of non-dual enrolled students for students attending on-campus courses taught by college instructors, but that the colleges are authorized to use institutional aid to offset the total cost to no lower than $50 per credit hour, with fees to be assessed first and the remaining portion charged to general tuition for courses taught at the secondary high school by secondary school instructors. Additionally, staff also recommends that tuition and fees for dual enrolled students enrolled in secondary home study programs be set at the traditional credit hour rate of non-dual enrolled students, but that the colleges are authorized to use institutional aid to offset the total to $50 per credit hour, with fees to be assessed first and the remaining portion charged to general tuition.
You've heard the recommendation from staff. Is there a motion?
Motion by Hardy, Tim, second by Price.
Is there any discussion? Anybody have any questions? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carried.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson. Next, we'll go to personnel. Supervisor Tim Hardy will present the personal action items for consideration by the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I request a motion to enter into executive session to discuss items J.9 and J.10. Is there a motion?
Motion by Smith, second by Salah.
It's been moved and seconded. At this time, I request a roll call vote. Ms. Waldrop?
Chair Mount,
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson,
Yes.
Supervisor Burke,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Butler McIntyre,
Yes.
Supervisor Hardy, Tim,
Yes.
Supervisor Johnson,
Yes.
Supervisor Lee,
Yes.
Supervisor Murphy,
Yes.
Supervisor Price,
Yes.
Supervisor Salah,
Yes.
Supervisor Smith,
Yes.
Supervisor Toops,
Yes.
Supervisor Payne, Supervisor Zarang. And we have a motion.
It's one to build that.
I know.
Southeast. A deal is that.
I think that's a good deal, right?
You can stay.
Whoops, sorry.
Sorry, I'm.
Everybody's here. You want to call the roll?
You did.
Want to read your?
What is she pointing to? Oh, okay. Yeah. We're going to reconvene the meeting, and I want to state that no votes were taken and no consensus was reached during the executive session. With that, Katie, would you call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Chair Mount,
Present.
Supervisor Jackson,
Present.
Supervisor Burt, Supervisor Bradford. Present. Supervisor Butler McIntyre. Here. Supervisor Hardy Tim,
Here.
Supervisor Johnson,
Here.
Supervisor Lee. Here. Supervisor Murphy,
Here.
Supervisor Price,
Here.
Supervisor Salath,
Here.
Supervisor Smith,
Here.
Supervisor Toops,
Here.
Supervisor Payne, Supervisor Zarang. We have all present.
Okay, at this time, I will continue to present the personnel action items for consideration by the board. First is pending and potential litigation or settlement authority.
Yes, sir. I'll read the recommendation. Staff recommends that the board authorize the system president and board counsel to negotiate a settlement with a former employee of Northwest Louisiana Technical Community College.
Is there a motion?
Motion by Butler McIntyre, second by Toops.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there objections? Is there discussion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item, appointment of Director of Internal Audit.
Yes, sir. As y'all may recall, June 22nd is actually the formal date of separation for Michael Redmond as the Director of Internal Audit. Prior to that, we took measures to advertise a replacement for his position and interviewed candidates for that position as well. With that said, staff and obviously board members are recommending Mr. Fleming, who currently has held the Assistant Director position for the Internal Audit Division as the replacement for Michael. Mr. Fleming has been with the LCTCS Internal Audit Division for 15 years with progressively more responsibilities through the years. And I'll read the recommendation. Staff recommends that the board appoint Mr. Jeffrey Fleming as the Louisiana Community and Technical College Systems Director of Internal Audit effective June 23rd, 2023. Staff further recommends a fair and equitable annual base salary of $126,500.
You have heard the recommendation. Is there a motion?
Motion by Jackson, second by Toops.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there a discussion? Are there objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Hardy. Thank you, Mr. Marin. And we'd like to ask you to come forward, and congratulations on an outstanding 15 years. And we look forward to working with you.
I know everybody likes to hear from the auditor, so I'm going to take my time.
Well, we like to hear from this one for sure.
That's right.
The gentler, kindler auditor.
I'm humbled and honored to accept this position. It's a professional goal of mine, and I can't thank you enough. I want to thank the search committee for their time and attention, and obviously their excellent choice. I believe
That an auditor with a sense of humor, right?
As Joe mentioned, I've been here 15 years. It's more than a job to me. The well-being, just say the well-standing of the department is important to me, and you will get my absolute very best. I believe a best-in-class internal audit function requires collaboration and open lines of communication. So my message to you and the people in this room is I'm always one phone call away. If you have questions, concerns, ideas, please reach out. That's how we will have the best internal audit shop in the state. One last thing, I would be remiss. I want to acknowledge my predecessor, Mike Redmond.
Yeah.
Without his support and mentorship, I would not be here today. So thank you, Mike. He's probably watching.
I hope so.
Thank you again, and no questions at this time.
Thank you, Jack.
Congrats, Jeff. Just as a side note, in the interview, I saw a different side of you. And I mean, it was interesting because he's been around us for so long, but that's a compliment. It was outstanding. A good side. I mean, it was actually fun. Okay. All right. All All right, we want to reference the updates and encourage board members to review of the alternative financing projects, report on general personnel actions, and status reports on capital projects. Is there any other business to come before the board? All right. Is there any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. All right, under announcements, most importantly, have a great summer. I know I'm looking forward to it, and I just hope you all have a happy and safe one. Please make note that the LCTC conference will be held at the Hilton Riverside in New Orleans, September the 27th through the 29th. So I hope you'll put that on your calendar today. Again, it's so important to be there and to offer support, and your presence would be greatly appreciated in that regard. Also, the president's evaluation, as well as the board's self-evaluation, will be going out July 10th. And I'm sure we'll be reminded of that by Katie, but we need you to complete it as soon as you can once you receive it. That's important for the self-board evaluation as well as the president's evaluation. Any questions? All right, hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Butler McIntyre.
Is there any
second by
objection?
Toots.
All right, we're adjourned.
Well, it's close.
Yeah, pretty close.